One look through this channel's content should make it obvious I'm a pretty big nerd, just a full-on geek. And if there's one thing geeks love more than arguing online, it's Star Trek. The shows, the movies, the spin-offs, the expanded universe, this franchise has dipped its toes into everything. Has all of it been good? Hell no! Between the J.J. Abrams reboot and the Alex Kurtzman era, the franchise hasn't been operating in peak condition. And yet, fans will swear up and down that classic Trek is timeless. And that's an intentional choice of words on my part, because here's the thing. Star Trek turns 60 this year. It's literally older than my mom. For new viewers, that's intimidating, not just because there's so much of it, but because of its age. Maybe these were classics once, but how about now? Is the franchise truly as timeless as fans argue, or is it just too old to be enjoyed nowadays? To answer those questions, let's go back to where it all began, Star Trek: The Original Series, and see if Gramps still got some gas left in the tank. If you really don't know anything about this franchise, here's the crash course. We're in the future. Humanity has put aside its differences and formed the United Federation of Planets. Basically the UN, except they actually do stuff. The series follows the Federation's flagship, the USS Enterprise, captained by James T. Kirk. The crew's mission is to explore the spaceways, make contact with new cultures, and, in general, to boldly go where no man has gone before. This show was created by Gene Roddenberry, who famously pitched it to network executives as a Western in space, which was, as they like to call it in the business, a bald-faced lie.
It's false. No way. Not this time.
Not that the show is boring or anything, but if you're expecting gunfights and quick-draw duels every week, you're gonna be disappointed. This show isn't really full of action, but it is full of memorable characters. One of the most notable aspects of the original series is its cast. Even if you've never seen a single episode, it's almost impossible to imagine that you're not at least vaguely aware of the Enterprise crew. You've got Kirk, the rule-breaking, swashbuckling hero, and pretty much the only guy who lives up to the whole space cowboy pitch. You got Spock, the elf-eared alien from the planet Vulcan, guided entirely by logic, though not without a healthy dose of dry humor and raised eyebrows. And then there's Dr. Leonard Bones McCoy, the ship's doctor, a hothead who constantly butts heads with Spock over the value of emotion versus reason. The rest of the crew, Scotty, Chekhov, Uhura, Chapel, Rand, and Sulu, frankly don't get that much screen time or development within the show itself. For most of its run, Star Trek is very much the Kirk, Spock, and McCoy show. That's a shame, and later entries in the franchise would benefit greatly from dropping the idea that the captain has to be the lead in every episode. But we're not quite there yet. No shade on Kirk, by the way. The guy's great. He has more depth to him than people give him credit for. He's probably my second favorite captain, right behind... Actually, you guys try and guess who my all-time favorite captain is. I'll like whatever comment gets it right. The issue isn't old Tiberius himself, it's just that keeping him front and center every single week limits the variety of stories the show can tell. Which is a shame, because the original series is at its best when it decides to focus on ideas. Due in part to budget constraints, this show did not have a Scrooge McDuck-style pool of money to swim in, TOS often relies on dialogue rather than spectacle. Instead of massive space battles, you get people sitting in rooms having very intense conversations about ethics, responsibilities, and cultural differences. This is what creates Star Trek's unique cocktail. You have incredibly pulpy sci-fi elements, colorful alien worlds, sexy babes, people in rubber monster suits, and all of that exists in service of these high-minded philosophical discussions. The series shows its age at points, but damn if this stuff isn't charming. Those ideas don't exist in a vacuum either. The original series introduces a lot of concepts that would later become staples of the franchise, including its major geopolitical factions. You got the Klingons, who at this point are pretty much just the bad guy faction. Look, it was the Cold War and we needed an analog for the Russians. They're aggressive, militaristic, and not exactly subtle. You might also notice they don't look anything like Klingons do in later shows and movies. That is a long story, and the full explanation, I believe, wouldn't come until Star Trek Enterprise, which was released a good 40 years after TOS. So, there's one reason to stick with the franchise. Then you've got the Romulans, who look exactly like Vulcans because the make budget ran out. Because they share a common ancestor with the Vulcans. Yeah, that's it. If the Klingons are the big, dumb warriors, the Romulans are all about deception and manipulation, with a culture heavily inspired by ancient Rome. Because I guess they didn't want to lean too heavily into making them space China. These factions help establish what Star Trek is really interested in: diplomacy, ideology, and how different societies clash, not just with weapons, but with values. Of course, the original series also has its fair share of quirks. I went through the episode list and counted no fewer than 9 episodes where the crew either travels back in time or conveniently encounters an alien culture inspired by Earth, up to and including one culture based on 1940s gangsters. Yes, really. Sometimes the show tries to give you a quote-unquote reasonable explanation. Other times it basically just shrugs and says, I don't know man, it's space. To the point where later Trek shows would openly joke about how often Kirk gave the space-time continuum the middle finger back in the day. But honestly, I can't complain too much about the time travel because it gave us what is probably the most famous episode of the original series, and arguably its best: The City on the Edge of Forever. This episode was written by famed sci-fi author Harlan Ellison, which already gives it some extra prestige. The premise is that the crew encounters the Guardian of Forever, a portal that allows time travel. A crazed McCoy jumps through it, and Kirk and Spock have to chase after him to the Depression-era United States. Once there, Kirk saves a woman named Edith from getting hit by a car, and the two fall in love. Because of course they do, this is Jim Kirk we're talking about. As the crew works to repair the damage to the timeline, Kirk becomes increasingly drawn to Edith and her idealistic beliefs, which very much resemble the philosophy that the Federation itself would later adopt. And then comes the twist. Edith is the problem. I'm not going to spoil the ending, but this episode perfectly captures what Star Trek does best. It's not about explosions or action set pieces. The best stories Trek ever did were the ones where the sci-fi concepts are used to deliver well-written and thoughtful discussions about philosophy, morality, and yeah, politics. Which brings me to a pet peeve, not with the show necessarily, but with some fans. Some people like to claim Star Trek, to say that the franchise as a whole is actually glorifying their specific worldview. These people don't understand the series. It's not, or at least it shouldn't be, about preaching to the audience. It's about moral dilemmas, about not knowing for sure what's the right thing to do. Kirk isn't some blind follower of the Federation's laws. He questions his orders if he thinks they're unjust, which is precisely the discussion at the center of City on the Edge of Forever. But if that episode is TOS at its apex, it's only fair I talk about the show at its nadir. That's right, gang, we're talking about Spock's brain. So get this. Some lady teleports aboard the Enterprise, knocks everybody out, and when they wake up, they find out she stole something. Spock's brain. Yes, Spock's actual, literal brain. The aliens are all stupid, you see, except when they get in this machine that makes them smart, but then they forget how to be smart a short while after, so they need Spock's brain to use as an operating system for the computer that runs their planet. But don't worry, Spock's not dead, but he will be in precisely 24 hours. Man, those Vulcans and their weird, narratively convenient physiology. Right off the bat, the episode poses a million questions. How did these random aliens know Spock was super smart? Was there really nothing else they could have used besides some guy's brain? Why not simply explain the situation to the Enterprise and ask for help? All these questions and more will be ignored about as hard as modern Star Trek is ignored by people with taste. The point is, Spock's brain is the result of severe budget cuts, and as such feels a lot like a random sci-fi B-movie from the time. Still, if you like Trek, chances are you also dig B-movies, and the episode is enjoyable in that so bad it's good way. By the end, the words Spock's brain alone are gonna make you laugh. In fact, fans even came up with the Spock's Brain Award for the worst episode of any given Trek series. As we discuss the other shows, I'll make sure to point out which episode gets this distinguished honor. I'm not trying to dunk on the show by discussing this, by the way. I'm just letting you know that not every episode is a banger, but a lot of them are. You have Naked Time, where the Enterprise crew gets infected with a virus that basically makes everybody act drunk. Cue the usual, people confessing their love for each other, people acting silly, some guy locking himself in the engine room and trying to destroy the ship, regular night out with the boys. You also have Arena, most famous for the final scene of Kirk and the Gorn fighting. Space Seed is probably the most significant episode of the series from a lore standpoint. It introduces us to Khan Noonien Singh, a genetically engineered superhuman who would one day become Captain Kirk's most bitter rival. The Trouble with Tribbles is probably the show's best comedic episode, with some genuinely funny moments. Mirror Mirror explores the concept of the multiverse decades before the MCU milked that cow dry, complete with having Uhura in a pretty sexy uniform and an evil Spock, who you can tell is evil because of his goatee. There's many others I could mention, but I think you get the point. I can't promise that you'll love every single episode of Star Trek, but I can tell you that they all have a unique quality to them. Even schlock like Spock's brain still has that Trek feel, that indescribable vibe that you just know when you see it, and helps even the worst episodes of this series feel endearing. This was a crew of people trying to make some entertaining sci-fi for us nerds to enjoy, and they did it all through budget cuts, network meddling, and backstage drama. And that love and determination is what allowed the series to become the pop culture cornerstone it is today. So yeah, I say Star Trek the original series is still worth watching in this day and age. Hell, you might even consider it downright refreshing compared to modern TV. And hey, if you're still itching for more classic Trek after you're finished, you still have the animated series, a direct continuation of the show featuring the same cast, plus a cute cat girl. And you even have Star Trek Continues, a fan project that lovingly recreates the show's look and feel. If you're looking for a new franchise to get obsessed with, or even if you've seen this stuff before, I say the 60th anniversary marks a fine time to watch Star Trek the original series. Anyway, those are my thoughts. What did you think? Have you seen TOS? Where does it rank in your favorite Star Trek shows? Let me know in the comments. Also, if you've enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss any future uploads, because next time, I'll be talking about another franchise with a significant anniversary, one just as well known and beloved as Star Trek. To celebrate the 40th anniversary, we're talking about Dragon Ball. See you there.